Hello and welcome to the Galactic Core podcast. My name is Chef and I'm your host as each week I discuss the latest TV episodes, films, games and whatever else takes my fancy from the worlds of Star Wars, Marvel, DC and anything else nerdy and geeky in between. If this is the first time that you found this, then please do give us a follow on our social media pages. You'll find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and also Twitch, where I do, not always successfully, but I do try and game a couple of times a week. You can find all the links in the episode description, and please make sure that you're giving the show a like, a follow, and a review on whichever platform it is that you listen or watch on. It really does mean the world to hear that you are liking and enjoying the show. Right now, we're going to get straight into the main event, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode. Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode. I'm really sorry that there wasn't an episode last week. There was a multitude of failures on my end that led to the episode not happening. I got my timings all wrong with my guests. He was, bless him, waiting for me late in the evening for him. It was the middle of the night for me, and I got my shit all wrong, and it ended up being far too late, unfortunately. And then there was a freaking storm, so my internet went down, and I just couldn't end up recording. So sorry that there wasn't an episode last week. But that does mean that this week we have a double feature episode review for you. And of course, we are still talking about Star Wars and Ahsoka. This has been a phenomenal series so far. Everyone's been talking about it, talking about this is possibly the best, definitely probably up there is the best Star Wars TV series we've had so far. Is it some of the best Star Wars that we've had of all time? I think that's going to be a massive debate that's going to be had. But I'm really excited that the guest I've got with me today is my guest from last week. He's very graciously agreed to forgive me for all my fuck-ups and come back this week to review episode 6 and 7 of Ahsoka. But please welcome to the show the amazing features from the That Comic podcasts.
Hello. Hello, Internet. How are you?
Well, thankfully, my internet's all working this week, and I didn't get my timings wrong. So it's really good to have you on features. Thank you for coming back this week.
I'm happy to be here, man. Great to be back.
How are you doing? What have you been up to lately?
Whew, man. Still podcasting. That's going pretty good. And my work schedule has been crazy too. So I'm not going to let you take all the blame on that. It's on me too. So no worries. But we're here now. We're gonna talk about it because it has been amazing. Is it the best Star Wars of all time? Like show series?
Yeah, that was probably a pretty bold statement to make. Probably not.
I mean, it's a bold statement. Is it
of the modern era of the Disney era?
Of the Disney era, I would argue that it is. Of the Disney era, I would definitely argue that it is. And you can debate whether it's between Andor or Ahsoka, because I know a lot of people like Andor. Some people are iffy. For me, it was a slow burn, but I think the show itself was really good. I think Ahsoka kind of started off a little bit of the same slow burn, but man, did it pick up, and it is just so good.
Because a lot of people have said that Andor and Ahsoka are the best of modern day Star Wars anyway, but at opposite ends of the spectrum. So Andor's covering, the plight of the everyday person in the days of the Empire and what they have to go through in the oppression and what they have to fight through to get there. But It's more obviously grounded in more of the everyday, whereas Ahsoka's more of the fantastical, more of the actual action adventure side that we forget sometimes that Star Wars is action adventure.
Yes.
And that's the more fantastical, the Jedi and the Sith, the Force, and all that sort of side of Star Wars. So, but I want to give you 5 Disney era shows or things that have happened within the Star Wars universe. And I want you to tell me who you've got the ratings of these as a top 5.
Okay.
So we've got obviously Andor and we've got Ahsoka so far in there. I want to throw Rogue One in there.
Yes.
I also want to throw the last 4 episodes of season 7 of Clone Wars, so the Siege of Mandalore, those 4 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to throw as a whole in there all of Rebels, because Rebels to me is a bit like Andor in the fact that it was a slow burner, or even like the start of the original Clone Wars, and the fact that season 1 of Clone Wars and season 1 of Rebels are very similar, that they start off slow, they're not particularly great, but once you get into the show more and more, it gets better and better and more emotional, and more you get more attached to it, or I did anyway. So, and Rebels was the first thing that Disney did as Star Wars when they bought Lucasfilm. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people forget that. So we've got Rebels, The Siege of Mandalore from season 7 Clone Wars, Rogue One, Andor, Ahsoka. Hit me.
Okay. So I'm not gonna lie to you. I have not finished watching Rebels. I'm still first
Damn,
season.
another person. I'm finding everyone that doesn't watch Rebels at the moment.
Well, you know what it is. You know what it is. Like you said when you were breaking it down, Rebels it's a slow burn, and also it's just like it's really hard to like get into those characters inside of that first season, and that can be a miss sometimes. Like, 'cause if there's not enough happening in the story or just visually to keep you locked into it, and you're just like, this is I'll come back to it. But I am going to find myself I do have to go back to Rebels, because the other talks is like people who are commenting on Ahsoka saying, "Oh, this is just Rebels season 5," and I'm like, okay, all right. Well,
Yeah.
now I have to go back and watch Rebels now, even though I you know, from other people that I know and friends that we talk Star Wars, I kind of know what happens, but I still have to watch it because I want to get a better understanding of the Rebels characters than I have now. But just off of the strength of Ahsoka, I would probably say if we're going to do a top 5, I would put Rebels in the 5 slot.
Fair, okay.
I'll put them in the 5 slot.
Where we hitting number 4?
4. 4 is probably what were the choices again? I know Andor and Ahsoka. Those are probably gonna be top 2.
Ahsoka, Andor, Rogue One, and the Siege of Mandalore episodes of Clone Wars season 7. So the last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars.
Okay. All right. Last 4 episodes of Clone Wars, that'll go in the 4 slot. Only because I have like, and I can't say it's because it's a TV show, but in comparison, because I do love Clone Wars. I didn't fall into Rebels as easily, but Clone Wars got me almost off the bat. But Rogue One, man, so good. And I mean, the Vader scene alone is it just kind of, it's hard to beat. You know what I mean?
It is, yeah.
I would have to put Clone Wars last 4 episodes of I would put that in the 4 slot. Rogue One is going in number 3, and then Andor, Ahsoka. I'm going to put Ahsoka at number 1. Personally, nice. I will put Ahsoka at number 1. And again, it's only because Andor was a slow burn, and it doesn't pick up really until like he goes to jail, and then we get to the bank heist. And by that time, you're just like, oh man, this is incredible because everything's happening. Oh my goodness, I love that. I love that about Andor. I do. I feel like I find my watching experience different from most because I can definitely fall into the story without caring about the action as long as the story's good. And if the action isn't good, as long as the story's good, I can sit and watch it. But if neither one are clicking, I might check out. So.
I think that's fair though, because sometimes the action can be amazing and it makes you not care so much about the story.
Right.
And then the reverse is good, that if the story's captivating and it really has you on tenterhooks, that you don't need a really good like action sequence or fight battle to really make it pop.
Right.
But then if both of them are lackluster, it really affects it. But I think this is one of those shows that they've nailed every side of it for the time being anyway.
Yes.
Because it really does put it up there. I mean, like you said, I loved Andor, and I've chatted about it a little bit in terms of really, like you say, I agree 100%. It was such a slow burner, but all of a sudden the anticipation built, and that sort of thing of it was just week by week. I'm like, shit, I actually can't. Like, you don't realize how much you want next week's episode to obviously start coming along,
Right.
and especially like you said, when you get to the prison stuff, that's where it really ramps up, and it is super emotional. I was at Star Wars Celebration this year because it was in the UK. My first time I got to go to it, which was absolutely amazing, and they did the
Awesome.
whole one way out chanting because there were like a good 30, 40, 50 people dressed up as the prisoners.
Wow.
And Andy Serkis himself was there and started the one way out chant, and basically all these people dressed up went from the stage and came out into like the main area and ran the entire length of this arena, which is a pretty long corridor to get to the exit. To be fair, and they
Wow.
just chanted the whole way down, one way out, and just ran like the entire way. And so the impact that even those scenes have when you watch it, and then obviously the absolute killer bit, they all get to the edge and he's like, I can't swim. And so you're
Yeah.
like, fuck. And then he's just left there, like, because Andor gets knocked out and they just go on their way. And you're like, shit, what's happened to him? I need to know what's
Right.
happened to Kino. But, the impact that's had in terms of everyone, I think for a while we're saying we need to step away from the Jedi and Sith because we've had that in pretty much everything and need to see what's happening to the everyday person, which has led to the shows of, Mandalorian. Okay, we've had a few Jedi in there, but
Mhm.
the Mando, Book of Boba Fett and Andor, to see the more everyday life that's going on there. It really has kicked into a new side of Star Wars that we didn't think we'd have, but it has really had an emotional impact, I think, and left that with everyone. That how do you beat that? Because obviously season 2, we know that leads up to Rogue One now, and obviously,
Yes.
and we know the end of Cassian's story there. So it's what's amazing is that you can go back and write a story for someone who
Mhm.
we already know the ending. We know
Right.
what happens to him and that he doesn't get to live on.
Right.
But the impact of his character from where he wasn't in a place where he was doing that for the rebellion and willing to sacrifice himself and getting there. If you
Mhm.
can write a story like that captivates people, knowing that this character dies already, then I think they've got a winner there. I don't know how you feel about a similar type story.
You know what? I actually do not mind a story where you go back and trace the steps that got them to where we first seen them. I don't mind stories like that. As a matter of fact, uh, I was talking with Minty, who was on the show with us last time. I was talking with him about it, just about everything going on with Disney, Star Wars, Kathleen Kennedy, Favreau, and Filoni. And we were talking about how Kathleen Kennedy wants so much to deviate away from the Skywalkers and all of the older, or I'll say the OG Star Wars characters. I'm like, but we don't even have all of those stories. Why would you want to leave that? It's almost the same as just leaving money on a table or on a sure bet. You know? Like,
Yeah.
and there's so many, and mind you, I now have to I have to go back and find all of the Legends material because again, so much
Mm.
story, so many stories. Like we got Luke at the beginning of his story arc, right? So we don't even understand what his rise to being Grand Master Luke Skywalker is. And I feel like us not getting that is a disservice to the Star Wars timeline, as well as I'll even say I think it's a disservice to George Lucas, even though he might not care as much. But because again, Rogue One, we know Cassian dies, but we get Andor, and we're like, oh, this is great, this is phenomenal, slow burn, but awesome. Like I by the time it was over, I was like, I can't wait till season 2. When are we getting it? And it's not coming for a little while. So it's like,
Mm.
but I'm still excited about it. The moment they say Andor season 2, I'm all in, you know? But, and I would feel the same way if they gave us a Luke Skywalker show. Or hell, give me a Vader story.
Oh yes,
Because
please
how
do.
many of those exist, right?
Yeah.
No one ever is not going to say, I don't want to see Darth Vader. That's a waste of time. Give me something new. No one says that at all. Like he's the driving force behind everything we know that is Star Wars. He's the driving force. Because
Yeah.
what other character in the Star Wars lore can galvanize people the way that Darth Vader does, or any of the Skywalkers for that matter?
Yeah, you're not exactly wrong. So I mean, you can see from behind me over here, from
Yeah,
how
I
much the
see.
figures, it's he has an impact on people. So
Yes.
I haven't got them up at the moment because I'm about to wall mount them in the next few days over here. Some actually, but I've got Anakin and Vader's lightsabers as well. So
Yes.
the impact that that character has. If you're going to do a Vader show, I'm not going to say no. And the people that say to me, you've got an entire saga named after him. The Skywalker saga, it's all about him. Do you need a Vader show? And I'm like, yes.
Yes.
Like
hundred percent.
we've had some comics and a couple of novels that have filled in some gaps here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and showed like the brutality of Vader, shall we say?
Yes.
But I'm like, I don't care. I want to see more. Like, give me more of that 5 minute scene at the end of Rogue One. Give me some of
Yeah.
that in actual live action.
And what makes the Vader character so great too is that he what am I trying to say? I just had it in my head too. I'm sorry. Vader himself is such a draw of a character, and much like Luke, right? We don't have all of the Vader stories, and for the most part, I don't think many of the newer Star Wars fans, and I'll put myself in that category as well, even though I've been around for a little bit, but I don't think people really understand or know who Darth Vader is or what he became. Because as Anakin Skywalker, there was a lot of things going on with him that they don't even really explain, that you have to read the books and find the other stories about just to understand, like, well, wait, this was going on and this is why he wanted to do that? Oh, why didn't they say that in the movie? It would have made more sense. He wouldn't have came off like some kind of like a whiny child, and you would understand. Oh, there are certain factors at risk for him, which is why he's going to these lengths. Like he's such a tragic yet uh uh semi sort of mysterious, only because of the way he was packaged to us in the movies. But just such a character that will pull people in, because you have to be excited about Darth Vader. The moment all the music drops out of the scene and all you hear is
Yeah.
like you're like it makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
Vader's about to come on. He's about to wreak havoc on people, and it's you want that, and I don't understand for the life of me why we can't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that scene in Rogue One, back then, because it was 2016 when it came out.
Yeah.
And back then, me and my best friend, we went to the midnight premiere every time a new Marvel or Star Wars film came out. And I remember being there for that Rogue One film, and that last scene when obviously they're in the corridor, the lights will go dark and you just hear the breathing. I immediately was sat up on the edge of my seat and I'm like, some shit's about to go down.
Right?
And then the minute that saber ignited and they started firing at him, I literally like jumped out of my seat cheering. And everyone's like, you're cheering the death of rebels. I'm like, hell yeah.
Yes.
Fucking Vader's behind it. Like that fight, like it's obviously 2 or 3 minutes, whatever. It's absolutely brutal scene was, to me, was some of the best Vader stuff we've ever had. Obviously, it was in general, but
Yes.
because it encapsulates everything that Vader had become, and just seeing that in live action in a way that we hadn't, because he was, from episode 4 onwards, a bit different in terms of the things that he had to face. Because
Right.
he has to go up against Obi-Wan, who he's technically lost to twice before. He's like, because everyone's like, oh, why weren't they doing all the flips and shit that they did in the original, like in the episode 3 or in the Kenobi series? I'm like, well, this dude's lost twice to Kenobi.
Right.
So he's acting a bit more cautiously, even if he's like, you can sense Kenobi's a bit older and weaker. He's like, I still lost twice to this guy. I'm going to be a bit more cautious this time.
Yeah. And
He has to meet his son in the next episode, or reveal to him anyway, and then go up against him in the third, which ends up being his redemption. So he's like completely changed in there to where he was the previous 19 years after turning. And it's just like, I want to see him like maybe after the Kenobi series,
yeah.
like a year or two after that, and and just see him kicking ass because he's like, right, I'm done with all this. I'm not playing games. I'm just going to kill everyone and fucking do whatever.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's crazy because as Anakin Skywalker, he's a good guy, good person, trying to do the right thing, but is met with so many hurdles and trials in front of him that he is absolutely not ready for. And he's just trying to make the best possible decisions he can. And the person that probably should have been guiding him, he got a lightsaber to the gut. Rest in peace, Qui-Gon, because that seems to be the only person that died from a lightsaber to the gut.
Yeah, this is true.
It's such a shame because I've seen people get stabbed like numerous times, same space, and they're like, I'm okay. It's just a flesh wound." Meanwhile,
there's a little lightsaber pocket in every body that you can hit without dying, isn't there? So.
Right. Meanwhile, Qui-Gon Jinn is just like, okay, I'll just rest here.
He's that like Indian meme, that Indian guy, even though he's just like,
yeah,
just like looking on as a Force ghost, like, fuck's sake. But one of these days, I'm gonna do a Vader specific episode and just talk Vader and Anakin the entire time because I get sidetracked talking about it every time I'm talking Star Wars.
Sorry, but here's the thing though, Vader is kind of the link between all of these characters that we're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Obviously, we had him in. Well, we had Anakin in episode 5 of Ahsoka.
Yes,
and let that lead us nicely then into episode 6.
Yes,
in terms of the show. I mean, before we jump into the 2 episodes itself, up until episode 5, then what have you been thinking about the show? We've already talked about. We think it's obviously fantastic, it's amazing, but what have been your own personal thoughts about episodes 1 to 5?
Episodes 1 through 5. Again, started off kind of slow, but I get it. There's some things they want to address. There's got to be some exposition to kind of show you where the show is going, which that part was cool. And then episode by episode, we get a little bit more. I honestly want to say, like, right up when we get to episode 5, because again, and we talked about this before, but me and my guy, we went to the theater to check out episode 5, and it probably was made to be seen as a theatrical release because, man, we go in there, the episode comes on, I'm blown away almost from beginning to the end. Well, no, not almost. I am blown away from beginning to the end. Even when, like, you get to when they bring the what Purgles? I'm just going to call them Space Whales for right now to not mess everything up. Yeah, but you see them hit the screen. It's like they put some time and money into this show. I'm excited to see what's going to happen next because by the time the episode's over and they hop into the mouth of the, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah.
She hops into the Purgle and then travels at light speed. Even seeing them kind of do their swimming swimming through space at light speed. That's amazing. I haven't seen that before outside of, like, maybe once or twice on Rebels. Haven't seen it before. And that's what I mean. Like, this is amazing in the sense of knowing what it looks like. They definitely had a healthy budget for this show. So there are some things that Filoni, or I think Filoni is the one who wrote, but what they're trying to do with it, where they want to take it, it's like, okay, this leaves me on the edge of my seat. I'm excited because if I'm getting this much, and mind you, episode 5, as great as it was, I'm not going to pretend like a lot of things happened. It wasn't a lot of things, but there were things that went on in the show where it had you. You had to be stuck in that moment, and like by the end of it, again, you're just looking like, what is going to happen next episode? Because it looks like the good guys are failing. and if we only get what, 8 or 9 episodes, right?
8, yeah.
So we're slowly creeping up on this final episode, and it's like, ooh, usually first season, good things happen, but and right now the only truly good thing that has happened is, spoiler alert, is the finding of Ezra Bridger, which is cool, right? and I we'll talk a little bit more about that moment in a moment. But dude, I mean, I don't want to say I haven't been excited to see Star Wars lore or shows, but I haven't been this excited in a very long time. Very long time. And I loved Kenobi. I was a fan of Boba Fett, even though it's not everybody's Boba, which I totally understand. Mandalorian was great. Season 3, shaky. But this Ahsoka has been. I mean, we could argue 80%. 80% good. I'm gonna say personally 100% good all throughout. Because there hasn't been an episode where I've picked up my phone or I fell asleep. I forget which episode it was, where I went to watch it while tired, and I woke up immediately as soon as it came on. I was like, "Yeah, can't go to sleep on this one." So, but yeah, so far, and this is just 1 through 5, amazing, and I'm all but sold on season 2. I just give it to me. You don't even have to worry about whether or not I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch it. Like, those Tuesdays are taken.
There is a debate whether we get a season 2 or whether they'll jump, because I think we do get another season of Mandalorian. Whether we get another season of Boba Fett, probably unlikely, I think, at this stage. But there's this debate of whether we get another season of Ahsoka or whether they'll just jump into the next season of Mandalorian and then bring everything together for Dave Filoni's Mandoverse film, which is obviously going to be wrapping up this entire storyline. I personally would like to see a season 2, because you want to see. I think we will get Thrawn appearances in season 4 of Rebels, because they tied everything together with obviously the bits at the end of Mando season 3 with the Imperial Remnant Council coming together. So I think Thrawn is lining up to make appearances in Mando season 4, even if it's not too many. I would like to see another season of Ahsoka to then set up the film.
Right.
Rather than just jumping straight into it. So, bringing everything together like, the Netflix Marvel's Defenders sort of thing. Bring it all together at the same point for everything. But, we roll off the back of that episode 5, which, epic. We get Anakin in there. And, Ahsoka coming out at the end of it is Ahsoka the White, as I think she's been called by plenty of people. And then, roll into this bit where we're finally getting Thrawn. I mean, let's just cover the first bit of that episode 6, where obviously you got Hugh Yang, who to me has been an MVP of this series in terms of, I didn't know this was the character I needed more of. He was great in the Clone Wars for the arc that he was in, and to get David Tennant voicing him again, he has been an unsung hero, I think, of this series in terms of a character we didn't know we needed. But obviously they're having that little chat just at the start where they're like, Sabine was maybe destined to make the choice she did in terms of giving them the map and going with them. And then it's just that whole thing of I don't know if you've seen that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where someone says something there and he's just just sort of whistles and points because it points out something that we've all heard. And it just basically happens at that end bit, doesn't it? Where she's like, tell me one of those stories. And Hyang's like, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far over.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, got you.
Yeah. The moment he said it, I was like,
yeah, I think we all
I definitely did point at the screen. Oh man, this show's been so good. Can I ask you, what was your reaction when we got Anakin on the screen?
I mean, Anakin / Vader, my favorite Star Wars character of all time, if not my favorite all-time character of anything. So I was super psyched. The fact that we got episode 3 Anakin back,
yes,
to start with, was absolutely epic, and then the crossover into Clone Wars Anakin, for episode, we're seeing as it was in his Clone Wars outfit with his haircut and everything like that. But then the transitions they did of him, with the flashes between Anakin and Vader, especially that bit where the Siege of Mandalore bit where he's like, you've learnt nothing, and kicks her back into the world between worlds, and everyone compares when he's walking forward and they do that transition between Anakin and Vader, and he sort of just that shoulder shrug as if he's ready to start kick some ass, and everyone compares it to the Henry Cavill when he's locking and loading for the punches, where he's and getting ready to go. Everyone compares his shoulder shrug to this is Anakin getting ready to go. the whole thing is just completely epic to have him back there. And I think a lot of people have probably talked about it. The hate he got as a kid, or a young, a young man during episodes 2 and 3,
Yeah.
and then the love he had. I mean, again, at Star Wars Celebration when he came out, and the crowd just chanted for him non-stop for a good 5 minutes, and you physically saw him tearing up at the reaction. It just shows that a bit of time and a bit of love and patience, and he's getting the love he deserves. And it was almost completing his circle. Okay, we saw him in Kenobi, obviously, as both Anakin and Vader, and then bringing him back to be with Ahsoka as well. It's almost like completes that circle for him and his journey in Star Wars. And I couldn't have been happier to have him back because, like I said, he's pretty much my all-time favorite character. I would just jump on anything that Hayden Christensen does as Anakin or Vader. So I was absolutely thrilled to have him in there. It took me a little bit to absorb his performance in it as well, because then I have to sit back and think of it as a proper Anakin context in terms of what did that character bring to this particular episode.
Right.
And I think I mentioned it before when I covered this episode, but have you read any of the novels called From a Certain Point of View?
No, not yet. It's funny.
So
Menzies reading that one now.
Because they cover obviously the 3 original trilogy films. A lot of the stories are like just about side characters and background characters that bring a bit more context to the stories around them. But in Return of the Jedi, it only came out recently, to be fair. I think at the start of September. But there's a little short story in there called Brotherhood. Now, this is done by the same guy, Michael Shin, who recently did a novel called Brotherhood that was based on Anakin and Kenobi at the start of the Clone Wars. So this is him doing now a short story for this book, and it basically covers Vader / Anakin as he dies in Episode 6, and as he goes into the Force, and how he becomes part of the Cosmic Force and a Force ghost. This came out the week before Episode 5, I think. So you read there, and the fact that he connects with Kenobi in the Force, and they talk to each other about his failings, about the things that he did well and that he did good with in his life, and the things that he did badly, and he has to own all those separate things. But at the same point, now he's passing into the Cosmic Force, he has to let go of those things and just let Luke and Leia handle themselves, and he can't worry about them anymore, and he just has to let it all go. And to me, that actually speaks a lot into his performance in Episode 5 as well, where he's trying to teach Ahsoka a lesson, and where he becomes sort of like Vader in this episode, and he's got his red lightsaber, and he's getting all angry and Sith-eyed up with Ahsoka, and then that moment where she's like taking his saber off him and throws it away, and she's like, "I choose to live," and he stands back, and he calms himself and turns back into like normal Anakin with his normal eyes and a smile on his face. And that's, to me, that was Cosmic Force Anakin knowing the difference between trying to teach a lesson and letting go of the things that he can no longer control or that he has hate for, and being balanced within himself. So if you haven't read that short story, I've mentioned it a couple of times, to be fair, because it is an epic little short story, but to me it ties in really well with the Anakin we got in that episode and the performance that was given by Hayden for it, which to me just obviously deepens the understanding of the character and what he went through. Plus you get to obviously find out what happened to Anakin Kenobi in the Force after all that. So it was an epic moment, and I absolutely loved him, to be fair.
Oh man. Yeah, I would say to your point, especially with the shoulder shrug, I said to one of my friends, I said, Hayden Christensen has to be the most menacing person with a lightsaber I've ever seen in real life. Like, because that shrug, like, okay, Henry Cavill with the punches, like doing that's pretty. It's an intense look, and it was funny because the first one I was, oh, he about to wail on somebody. But every time I see Hayden Christensen do it, it's just like I feel like no one can beat him. Looks, it doesn't look like this is acting anymore. It's just like, all right, we about to fight, and you're gonna lose. That's how it goes. And if you've seen any of the training montages with him and showing you like the light, especially the lightsaber battle on Mustafar, man. I don't know if he's really a Jedi Knight, like in real life or not, but this guy, I would hate to be in front of him with a sword.
Yeah.
But
it's not like any of the things he does are faked with the lightsaber either, in terms of like the 12s, the fast-paced action. I mean, so
that's all him. And out of everybody that's filmed in Star Wars, I think he might be the only one that's really, really gotten into the lightsaber battles and all that training.
Well, I think Rosario Dawson was saying that, on set he was fantastic because he's been doing this for a long time in terms of, dating back to the early 2000s with doing all the lightsaber stuff. And so he was giving tips to people on set, to the stunt guys, to the other actors about how to act with a lightsaber in your hand and how to do certain things. And it's just the fact that, behind the scenes, he's bringing that out and teaching the newer people working on Star Wars that, hey, this is an art form that you've got to really nail and stuff like that, and passing that knowledge on. So it speaks a lot to him as a person, let alone obviously the character that he plays that we all love, but just the man himself of what he brings to that character, and the fact that, like you said, once he zones in and puts that character face on, and he's like, I'm going to fucking kick your ass right now, and he's like, I believe you.
Right, yeah, no, but he's been great, and I think in during that whole sequence with Ahsoka going into the world between worlds, I think I almost fell out my seat when they show him walking away, and then, like you said, the flashes between him being Anakin and then Vader was so well done. It was so well done that if the episode had stopped right there, I probably still would have been okay with it, because I'm like, oh, the next episode is going to be amazing. He's going to be Vader. I would have lost my everything had I not been in the theater. But it was amazing, and that was, man.
Yeah,
this show. I don't know what they do afterwards to top this. I do hope there's a season 4 Mando, which I'm pretty sure we'll get. I would absolutely love a second Boba Fett season, as long as they do it right, which I think without all the struggles and things that they've been dealing with internally, if that ceases, we just may. Outside of that, yeah, let Ahsoka be the jump off point for any of the new lore for Star Wars. I think that's how it should be, right? But again, falling back to the Skywalkers, you don't even get Ahsoka without the Skywalker saga. So it's, again, I don't know who we got to talk to at Disney, Kathleen or somebody. Give us these Skywalker stories. Give it to us, because again, we already have a great point where we know we can go almost anywhere. We've just extended the Star Wars universe into an entire new galaxy of things we don't even know are there yet, unexplained, like occurrence. Like, anything can happen. Anything can happen, and I'm here for it. Like, give it to me. It's funny because Minty will always say, if you ever have a problem with Star Wars, the fix for it is more Star Wars. And I'm slowly but surely seeing that is true. Just give me more Star Wars, because it eventually explains everything that you don't understand.
Yeah, I do like that. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it, to be fair. So let's get into episode 6 then. So we had that start, as we mentioned, and then we get back onto the Eye of Sion, and they're arriving at their destination, and we get this interaction with the three great mothers. On the original homeworld of what they call the Dathomiri, aren't they? The Dathomiri Night Sisters.
The Night Sisters. Yeah.
And it took me a week or so to find out, but sort of like the main one of the three, the actress is Claudia Black, who most famous for being in Farscape and Stargate SG-1.
Oh, wow.
And she's been in a few other bits and pieces as well. But the fact that obviously you're not going to recognise her because she's in a great red dress and face makeup. But I was just went, oh, okay, that's who it is. I hadn't seen her for a while. I wonder what she was doing, to be fair.
Yeah.
But she was there, and the fact that we then obviously go on to what we've been waiting for a lot of this series, which was the appearance of Thrawn.
Yes.
A very dramatic entrance. We get the Chimera, his Imperial starship, all fixed up from what happened at the end of Rebels when it was taken away by the Purgo in the first place, all the damage was done, and all the speculation going on with his obviously troopers that have were labelled in the subtitles as night troopers.
Right.
Where, their armor's been fixed up with gold. They've got all of this red tape around them, or red cloth, and obviously the captain in charge of his guard, Enoch, with his almost Romanesque or like samurai type gold mask in his stormtrooper helmet. And obviously we've got Lars Mikkelsen returning to play Thrawn. Voiced him in Rebels. He was the character I was most excited about coming into live action because you get that same voice, which was so penetrating in Rebels and so on the nose that if you hadn't been the same voice, I think I would have been really upset. I can accept a lot of the characters not having the same voice from Rebels to live action because you're often different people playing them. But to me, Thrawn was the one that was so distinctive that if it wasn't the same, it was not going to be right. And he walks on, and his first line's pretty chilling as well. I can't remember it word for word, but it was like, everything that they feared would happen is about to come true for our enemies.
Right.
And he's like, shit, he's already on us already. What were your reaction when we finally got Thrawn on scene in this episode?
Okay. So when the Chimera pulls up, right, they're on that huge platform shifting in the sky, and then the Chimera pulls up slowly, very, very in extreme dramatic fashion. Music is playing. You're like, oh, okay, it's about to happen. And then they get there, ship comes down, they go up, stormtroopers come out. You see them, you're like, whoa, this is different. These aren't your everyday stormtroopers. And then Thrawn.
Yeah.
I think that part, I will say that part, I feel like, I don't think they needed to call his name so much. However, that they did it, I guess my only thing about it was I wish it was like a little bit louder. It didn't feel like their chants didn't feel as commanding as like, yo, y'all better pay attention. The man is coming through. But even him walking down and walking up, you go like, yep, this is Thrawn. It's really about to go down. How does the rest of this show play out? And seeing him live action, hearing the voice, it's all the things that you want. And I think even with that entrance from the ship coming in to him walking up to greeting the Night Sisters and everybody else coming to the ship, it gave you a sense of how dangerous this man is going to be. Not is going to be. Because right now he's like, you found me. Now I can go home. And I feel like once he gets back into, like, I don't want to say normal galaxy, but when he gets back, there might be hell to pay for all the rebels in the new Republic, because they are. I mean, it's almost like a repeat, because they're looking at it like, oh, everything's fine. The Republic is blooming. There's no empire, and then it's always the handful of people go like, no, I'm telling you, this guy's coming back. We hear the whispers. I followed them, and then I followed them, and I see the guy. And they're like, no, we're good. So it's that same unpreparedness that the Jedis had when Palpatine took over. So it's Thrawn's advantage is that they don't believe he's still alive. So that the whole surprise. The surprise advantage he has is going to work so well in his favor, and that they're so not ready for this. And I don't even know if Ahsoka or Sabine or Ezra can even get back. Not get back in time, if they can get back. Because, mind you, they're a whole galaxies away.
They're in a galaxy far, far away.
Right. And he has a warp ship that he can use.
Yeah.
He has the coordinates now. He's good, but they're not. That's the only problem. So I think what would have to happen in that sense is, Ahsoka somehow charming another Purgle to hitch a ride back. Otherwise, it might be a little bit of a tragic story for them. But Thrawn Thrawn's entrance, amazing. Again, you get that sense of this is a threat. And not just a threat, it's a promise of a return of times that you know that the Republic were trying to escape from.
Mm. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
the other thing I get from him more than I've gotten from Palpatine, because Palpatine was more of a behind the scenes and everything's done in secret, so you don't even know all of his plans as things are happening. They're just happening, and then you find out later. But with Thrawn, it's like, no, I know he's up to something, and what he's up to is, I think if he succeeds, I don't know how they can stop him, because you think about the state of things now. There is no there's no Jedi Order. There are random people who are either skilled in the Force or were Jedi's, and they're like, yeah, no, we're not trying to die anymore. They're still Inquisitors looking for us. It's a whole to do thing for this, and again, I'm excited to see where this story is going to go, dealing with Thrawn, or even what the impact is going to be having Ezra back as well. Because I like, what does he do? How do they fix this?
Yeah.
You know?
But he's just so menacing, Thrawn. Like, again, it's just, to me, it comes back to how the voice does it all. It's just how the voice portrays it all. Because you got that moment when, him and Sabine are talking.
Mm-hmm.
And she's always trying to be a bit slick with her comebacks. And he's just like cool and calculating.
Yep.
And she's just like, just tell me where Ezra is. And he's like, yes, your search for your friend. And he's just like, he just delivers this cool line. I think it was he's like, how that singular focus will reshape the course of the galaxy. He's like, by your will to want to find your friend led to you to give us the map, which led the ship here, which is going to free me and take me back to my own galaxy, sort of thing. It's just how calculating and cool he is in the face of someone trying to be like. I mean, Sabine to me has been not the greatest character in the series. I've not particularly enjoyed her from where she was in Rebels to where she is here. She's been a whiny little bitch, to be fair. And she's like 30 odd years old and still making decisions like she's a 17-year-old teenager Mandalorian. I know Mandalorians are hot-headed in general and make rash decisions, but fuck me, she's been terrible in the decision-making process. But she's sent off to go and find Ezra. Some people are calling her fight scene with the Raiders one of the best fight scenes in the series. I thought it was an okay fight scene. It shows off obviously the Beskar doing its job again in deflecting shots, and she only really gets to defeat them when she whips out a lightsaber, which even another galaxy seems to be able to slice everything apart. So, what I actually enjoyed about this was the end of this sort of fight scene where the howler that she's been riding sort of comes back, because you think when she first goes to sit on it, it's this like fearsome beast because he's like, and then he runs off and he comes back with his like tail between his legs, like, oh, I'm sorry. She's like, you abandoned me, go away. And he sort of like goes off the one way and then just quickly runs back after her, and she's like, fine, okay. And he turns out that they're just cute little dogs in this universe. I love that. Obviously, it always brings a bit of light comedy to it, but what was interesting again in this episode, though, is what we get between Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that Baylan's purpose for wanting to join with Morgan Elsbeth to find Thrawn is his motivations are different to what we thought. He thought he was just seeking power or just to be alongside powerful people as their mercenary, so to speak. But he tells Shin in here that there's something about this. He was told something in the stories of old in the Jedi Order about things in this galaxy, about a power that was here on this particular planet, and how he wants to find it because it's going to reshape the entire order of things. Because he says, this little great analogy he has that things like the Empire and the Republic and the Jedi Order, they come and go and they repeat themselves over and over again throughout the course of history, which is probably true, to be fair. And then he's like, this power here has the ability to reshape everything and make it different.
Right.
So obviously there's going to be a lot of speculation to what this particular power is. I've got my own theories. But in terms of like every time Baylan Skoll's on screen, he's so captivating. Yeah. Everything, he's R.I.P. Ray Stevenson. Is going to be such a shame we're not going to get any more of him because he's played this character so well. And and the way that Shin Hati plays off him as well, in terms of she's got this obvious, high respect for him, the way that she looks up to him, and the actress herself has got the most expressive eyes in the world
Yes.
in terms of just how she's looking at him and absorbing things and the little chats that they have. But what did you think to not only obviously the scenes that they had in this particular episode, but this whole thing about there being a bigger power that potentially the Night Sisters and Thrawn want to also get away from?
So the the rumors, or what some rumors that I've heard, or what this power might be, is even more interesting. Because they're saying like it for Balin, it wasn't necessarily like the Night Sisters calling to him, but the rumors that this power that he's feeling, that's calling out to him, it could be Abeloth.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah. If it is, kind of amazing. But then it also plays into people also believing that Anakin, this version of Anakin that we saw, is now he's the embodiment of the Force, like the actual balance.
Yeah.
So you know how like in Clone Wars there was the father and the son and the
the
daughter.
Mortis gods, yeah.
Yes. So they're saying that Anakin might be the actual the father in this instance. Which, if that's the case, I think I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with that. But I also really am kind of curious to see what it is that's actually calling Balin, because he's a dark Jedi that we know of, but his behavior doesn't feel dark.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel dark. It feels like kind of like a mercenary, but at the same time, I don't think he's accepted any payment. He's just like, there's I want to go there. If you guys can get me there, let's do it. But I love his sense of, he still has a moral compass. Because there were times where had prime example, had this had been Vader instead of Balin Skull, that scene where Sabine gives him the map, Vader would have just killed her. There would have been there wouldn't have been any talking. It would have been force grab, give me that slice. All right, now we out of here. But with Balin Skull, it was more so like, listen, just give me that. You can come with me. You can find Ezra, and we're good. We don't have to do nothing else after that part. I'm not here for you. You're not really here for me. And we can go about our separate ways. And that feels like a Jedi, not a dark Jedi, but just a Jedi. Like, he's like, all right, this works out for all parties. Let's do this. He doesn't feel dark, outside of the fact that, I don't think he'll hesitate to kill anybody if need be. But if it doesn't fit the cause, then he just won't do it. And I like that about him. It is going to be a shame that we're not going to get more of this character beyond this season, because he's very interesting, and I would like to know more about him, and I just don't think we're going to get that at this point.
I mean, maybe they do some like prequel comics maybe to this series of the character. That's the way to fill in some gaps, but it's going to be a shame. I want to throw my theories out for you,
okay,
and see what you think. Depends this one, because it's one from Rebels. How much you know? Do you know much of Bendu from Rebels?
Bendu,
the character. Mm-hmm. So this was like a creature that they met on a planet who is basically an embodiment of the middle of the Force. So he's neither light nor dark. He doesn't side with the dark side or the light side of the Force. He embodies all of the Force.
Oh, wow.
He helps teach Kanan Jarrus to, after he gets blinded, to be able to look at things in a different way and to reach out through the Force to see things around him. He also, at the end of season 3, Kanan Jarrus pisses him off when Thrawn is attacking the base, and he just goes after all of them, Rebels and Empire alike, and he's the one that actually predicts Thrawn's downfall and defeat at the end of Rebels that led to them being taken off to this galaxy. So there is a theory that this is another type of Bendu, something that embodies all of the Force, because they're super powerful beings, and they have the ability to do things and shape things in their own will. They don't, like I said, they don't take a side. They just do what the Force tells them to do.
Right.
And maybe this means that Baylan Skoll has a role to play through the Force. Because what I like about, if we're just going to touch on Rogue One again quickly, what I liked about Rogue One is, without it being about the Jedi or the Sith, there was a very much a theme running through it about the Force, and the Force getting everyone to do what the Force needs it to do to play their role in getting those Death Star plans. So, they're always saying, "May the Force be with you," and they had she has the kyber crystal around her neck. For some reason, the character's name's gone out of my head, but the main character. And they're always talking about, believe in the Force and it'll guide you through. And so therefore the Force is always getting them to do exactly what needs to be done to get them to the next place to win the battle.
Right.
And I was thinking, if eventually they're going to defeat Thrawn, then the Force needs them to do something. So he's calling out to someone who is a former Jedi who still has honor and is still bound by good in him. And it's going to somehow use him. And possibly this is the way we see the character being able to leave without being in such a bad way, is the fact that this type of Bendu, or this, middle of the Force type creature, inhabits or possesses Baylan, and then uses him to go back to the other galaxy and is using the Force to then fight Thrawn. Bit of an out there theory, but it was something that was fascinating, because if they're bringing a lot of rebels into this show, why not have something like the Bendu? The other theory is that this is a pretty wild one. Did you play the Jedi Fallen Order game?
I didn't play Fallen Order. I played
Did you play the newer one, Survivor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I haven't finished it yet, but I played it. Yes.
In Jedi Fallen Order, there's a race called the Zepho, which were Force sensitive beings that something arranged for quite a bit of time in the galaxy beforehand. But he came across this tomb of one on Dathomir, called Kujet. He was apparently very powerful sage, very strong with the dark side of the Force and dark rituals. And when they're on this planet in this episode of Peridia, there's an inscription on a wall behind one of them that talks about Kujet and how he's the Lord or the Force over everything. And in some of the lore, he was actually on this planet, I think, in previous centuries or something like that. So there's a theory that, because he's now linked to the Night Sisters in terms of he had a tomb on Dathomir, where he had a certain weapon that Cal Kestis was after, he can then be linked to this particular planet, as he's been linked to with the inscription on the wall in this episode, and that he's the power that's calling out to Baylan. And therefore Baylan's going to unleash what he thinks is a powerful force that will reshape the galaxy, but it's actually going to be pretty fucking bad. And all like Thrawn, Ezra, Ahsoka, they're all going to have to band together in the final episode to defeat this power and escape together to get back to the Star Wars galaxy. If you don't know obviously much about Fallen Order, and you don't know of that, because it is a pretty obscure reference, to be fair. But the fact that it's linked in with the Night Sisters because it's on Dathomir and he's been on this planet before, it kind of links into a nice little potential tie together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now we're talking about the things that really make this show great, right? Because it's an expansion of things that we know or have ideas of, like putting the Night Sisters in. Now we're starting to deal like not less with the Force, but more Force driven things. Now we're getting into Force magic, dark Force magic, and how that's going to work. Like, and even with Thrawn's troopers, with people are trying to figure out whether or not they're like zombie stormtroopers or not. And I think that might have stemmed from the fact that Merrick, once he was disposed of, he kind of just turned to dust and faded away, and was like, what's happening here? Like, was he even a real person? So, and then I think I'm trying to remember if that happened to one of the stormtroopers. It hasn't, because we haven't seen him die yet. But that's the idea that now Thrawn has these troopers that were brought back from the dead, from the land of the dead, by the Night Sisters, which that's within their realm of things to do, So just having all of these new new ideas and origins and characters and people to play with, I think is really what's the driving force of what makes this show even more amazing. Because like aside from Andor, right? How much like talking or rumor mill has happened from the last couple Star Wars shows. Like I don't think to this scale because you can go in so many directions as of right now with Ahsoka.
Yeah, absolutely true, to be fair. I mean, take my own predictions with a pinch of salt because they usually turn out to be fucking awful and so far off. Um,
No.
but yeah, in terms I think that's what makes part of it great as well, is that week by week we then get to sit here and we get to speculate about what's going to happen. And I chat to my friends at work about it all the time, or I get asked a lot of questions. I think is the more accurate description. Like, Andy, do you know what's happening with this? Is the local nerds? Do you know what's going on?
You're like, well, let me see.
Yeah, I have to explain a lot of lore to them all about things that have gone on. But yeah, I think it's what the show set up great because to be fair, when we saw Anakin pop up at the end of episode 4, before we got everything that happened in episode 5, did anyone actually predict what we got in episode 5? Apart from maybe saying Clone War flashbacks, which is a general thing, But this is what I mean is like we went away from the episode going, what's going to happen next week with Anakin? Is it really Anakin? Is it the son? Is it this? Is it that? Is it all these things is what makes the show great week by week, and it's what I prefer over something like Netflix that drops all of its episodes at once for the most part.
Right.
You get the rush then to have to watch all the episodes to then be able to discuss it with everyone, and a month later the hype's gone.
Right.
And it's over and done with. Whereas this week by week, we're getting to review the episodes, we're getting to chat about everything and speculate, and that's part of what makes it great. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on with that, to be fair. But then we do get a reveal in this episode of that they're transporting these what look like caskets to me onto Thrawn's ship.
Yeah.
To escape. Again, we can speculate a lot about what are in these. What's this cargo they're transporting? The heavy favorite money seems to be that these are potentially either Night Sisters put into stasis or dead Night Sisters they're just transporting back to reanimate them when they get back over there.
Mm-hmm.
Are you agreeing with this? Have you got any theories on them?
So I'm currently reading the Heir to the Empire, listening to the Heir to the Empire audiobooks. My theory is that what they're transporting I think is definitely people. Not sure whether it's more Night Sisters or more troopers. But definitely bringing them up to be either reanimated or just having their DNA so that they can clone more. Because I think a lot of what we're seeing now, if we go back to Andor, where they were talking about cloning, and that was like a major thing. And even when we get into the last season of The Mandalorian, dealing with Moff Gideon and his clones. So I feel like we're going to get more clones. It's not going to be to the extent of the Jango Fett clones, the clone troopers, but I think we're going to get more clones. I also am under the suspicion that if you've read the Heir to the Empire books, this Katana fleet of ships, I definitely think Thrawn might be going for that. I don't know how they're going to show that on TV, because apparently this is supposed to be a huge fleet. And the way it's designed, it seems it's perfect for Thrawn in the way he runs the show. So I think we might be getting that.
Interesting.
Because but here's the other part of this. It's hard to tell that story, right? And not have Luke Skywalker in it because he's around for all of this. He's around for all of it, and I'm just like, we gotta have the Skywalker saga does not end at Return of the Jedi Return of the Jedi. It doesn't end there. We don't. I want to see Luke rebuilding the Jedi temples and the Order itself. Like, I need to see those things. I want to see what happened before we got The Force Awakens. Because these, like, even with the Ahsoka show happening, all these episodes and shows are happening years in between, and we're dealing with space. So, and I don't even know how to tell time out in space. So there's so much there that can be, so many stories that can be told, and I wouldn't even care to keep it in time order. Just give me the shows, you know.
Yeah,
I'll just take the shows. But yeah, that's my theory. I think we get the Katana fleet because Thrawn needs it, because he's still in the rebuild mode for what his empire is supposed to look like.
Nice.
But I don't think that happens until he gets back. So I do believe he gets back. I don't know what's going to happen with Ahsoka, Ezra, and Sabine, honestly. But do we get a season 2? Hopefully. Does it become a movie? Maybe. Who knows? That might be even better.
Well, we are getting that Dave Filoni Mandoverse film that wraps up the whole storyline. So, it's just whether we get that season 2 before that date, isn't it? So, but then next in this episode, I mean, probably the last major talking point of here is, finally the reveal of Ezra as well. So we got Thrawn at the start of the episode. We get Ezra at the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
To me, underwhelming reveal. For those who aren't familiar with Ezra, obviously it's not going to, again, really have much of an impact for them.
Mm-hmm.
For those of us that do know him and know him well, it's so underwhelming because he just pops up in the background like, I knew I could count on you, and it's just like, really, that's the big introduction we got. Like, okay, you maybe don't always need a big dramatic introduction of a character, but I felt like this warranted the build up to the whole point of half of them wanting to go to this galaxy was to get Ezra in the first place. So it would have been nice to have a bigger reveal. And everyone's saying that Kenobi in episode 2 is what Space Jesus looks like. I think we've just found what the new Space Jesus looks like, really, don't we? But they did a really good job of how Ezra looked, I think, for it being about 10 years after the end. So he's in his late 20s at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Someone did a side-by-side comparison of what his father looked like in Rebels to what he looks like in the show, and they're almost exact. So they've done a really good job. If you ever get a chance to Google it, just Google what his father looked like in Rebels and what Ezra looks like in the show, and they're very, very similar. So they've done a really good job. But what were your thoughts on finally getting to see Ezra in this episode?
Okay, so I agree. His appearance was very underwhelming, and I think that it was only like that because we got Thrawn. It was grand. It's grand entrance, right? And I thought we weren't going to get Thrawn to the end of the episode, but as I realized we had more time left, I was like, and I said to myself, I was like, no, they're not going to give us 2 cameos in one episode. That's too much. It's way too much. And then when we got Ezra, then I was like, I felt like this was coming. I think that's the only part. It's probably the only part of the episode that, not that I didn't like it, but it felt almost like paint by numbers. Like they just were like, well, we got Thrawn, but we got time left. So how do we end this episode? Let's just throw Ezra in. Because I don't think Ezra has been the draw this entire time. It's always been Thrawn.
Yeah.
Always. So, kind of shuffling Ezra in at the end, it's okay. It doesn't hurt anything, but at the same time you go like, I feel like he probably should have been a little bit more. I think, but again, I haven't watched all of Rebels, so if you as a Rebels fan, do you believe like it should have been like a little bit bigger than that? Just like instead of I knew you'd find me. How you doing, Sabine?
That's a good impression to be fair. Yeah, I felt it needed to be bigger a little bit after all this build up to him and the whole mystery of where do they went at the end of Rebels and and just literally this whole build up to it. It felt like it deserved more. I almost thought that when she's looking round and they pan round her face to over her shoulder, you just see him in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Before he said anything, I thought they were just going to end the episode there. because
Right.
that would have been like a little cliffhanger ready to start fresh in the next episode. And I thought that maybe would have been a better way to do it. So you see him there, you know that she's found him,
Yeah.
but you don't need to have that sort of little conversation that they have.
Right.
So yeah, to me it was a bit underwhelming. They needed to do a little bit better with that one. But at the same point, at least we've got to Ezra now. I
Yeah.
was starting to worry, 5 episodes in, that we weren't going to see them until maybe the last episode, and that would have really pissed me off, both Thrawn and Ezra.
Right.
So good to get them a little bit earlier, so we do get a little bit into it.
Well, really quick, let me ask you. Right before we got Ezra, when Thrawn sees her off, he goes, there's a good chance he didn't survive, and you're just going to be out there. I'm going to leave you, and then you'll be stuck. If you're okay with that, because I'm okay with that. And I was like, what if he isn't there? Because him being on that planet kind of was like, okay, cool. Because Thrawn's been on his ship this entire time. That doesn't necessarily mean he was on that particular planet. You know what I mean? And so for it to just happen upon Ezra was like, okay, all right, this works. I guess we can all assume that he was here. We don't, because even Thrawn was like, if he survived, cool. You're good. You can go find him if you want. But
again, I think the only thing they maybe messed up with this was the fact that they say to her, "We'll give you the latest intel on where we think Bridges' whereabouts are as well." But let's be fair, he gets found by Sabine pretty easily.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to know where he is. They've got an estimate of his whereabouts, but they don't seem to know where he is, and to the point where they could have attacked and killed him quite easily with the troopers that they had and stuff.
Yeah.
And then they're just like, oh, okay, off you go to go and find him. So, why didn't they bother to go and find him if he was only local?
I have an answer for that.
Okay, go, hit me, tell me.
So, the reason why they didn't go after him is because Ezra had no way he wasn't a threat to Thrawn. And from what I have been reading up about Thrawn is he won't start. He won't start the fight, but he will finish a fight. He won't swing first. I feel like with him, you have to establish yourself as a threat. And for him still being on the Chimera, still having a fleet of troopers, he probably looked at Ezra like, I just need to find my way out of this particular sector. Once I can do that, this really isn't a problem. He can stay here. That's on him. It's not on me. And I think that's how Thrawn looked at it. But with Sabine arriving, and we'll go ahead and go look for him. Because then he's like, now I have 2 pawns that I can spare that cost me nothing, which were Balin and Shin Basi. And he's like, hey, follow her. If you happen upon Ezra and she finds him, kill them both. Cool. He's just out of my hair.
Yeah, I get that, to be fair. I mean, I'm definitely more petty than Thrawn, because if it had been like, this is the little shit that got me brought to another galaxy, I'm finding him straight away and killing his ass. Just out of pure satisfaction, revenge.
To be fair, I probably would have done the same. I dig the cold calculating, the way Thrawn moves. But yeah, I move with far too much emotion, because I would have definitely been on the same vibe. Like, all right, you got me stranded out here. When I find you, I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to find my way out of here. But you're going to die because you caused me a whole lot of headache. But yeah,
no, I know what you mean. I mean, I still think they miss a lot of opportunities in these series to not put in classic Star Wars lines that we get everywhere else. So, okay, his first line to Sabine is very much about something that he said to her, obviously in the hologram and stuff like that. But there is opportunities here to put classic lines in that they've used elsewhere. Because wouldn't it have been great if he's there with behind Sabine, she turns around, sees him, and he just goes, "Hello there."
Yeah.
So, I think they're missing out on these grand opportunities, to be fair. But so obviously that was the big reveal of episode 6 towards the end of it, and then we get into episode 7, and after an episode of Ahsoka without really having any Ahsoka in it, we get Ahsoka back in episode 7.
Yeah.
So they're arriving finally in this new galaxy in the mouth of a space whale, which is definitely one way to travel, that's for sure. And very much a Thrawn planned out welcome party for them in terms of all these mines put out there waiting for them. Hugh Yang obviously puts his metallic foot in his mouth where he's like, at least the whales are giving us some cover, and then they fuck off.
Right. You had to say that, didn't you?
Yeah. And then they obviously hide in the Purgle Bone wasteland, essentially. What was really great is obviously in the previous episode, Thrawn had said, I want to know everything about Ahsoka Tano.
Right.
I want to know, where she's from, her backstory, her master, everything about this. And when he's brought this information by Morgan Elsbeth, I think it's a rare time that we see fear on the face of Thrawn, because he just looks at this information. He's like, her master was General Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
And he's one of the few people that had worked with Anakin in the Clone Wars, if you've read any of the newer Thrawn trilogy. And he had very much worked out that Darth Vader was Anakin.
Right.
And as far as he's aware, Anakin or Vader is still alive. He doesn't know that really, unless it's been communicated by Morgan Elsbeth since she arrived. Right. As far as he doesn't know whether he's alive or dead. As far as we've seen it, anyway. So he's like, shit, maybe Vader's come with Ahsoka to fucking stop me or something like that. And so, I think we see genuine fear in his face that this is, Anakin Skywalker's Padawan.
Right.
And as he says, Anakin was, very unpredictable and had no fear and was dangerous. And he's like, so his Padawan's going to be the same.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great little moment that we see there, that he kind of just shows that Thrawn may be cold and calculating and full of confidence, but he knows when to be fearful of the right people.
Yep. And this is a part of what makes him dangerous, right? Because the moment that the ship's picked up on their scanners, there's another ship approaching. There's a Jedi coming. He's like, he immediately went to saying, "Is it Ahsoka?" And they're like, "We don't know. Find me everything I need to know about Ahsoka Tano real quick." And the moment he does that, and this plays into him being I would call him a master strategist, because who else would think to leave a minefield out there right where the Purgle were going to leave out of hyperspace? Like, as soon as they come out, they're right in the minefield. Boom, 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 boom. And it's like the only space set up for them to clear out was headed towards the planet. So he pretty much plotted out her course of action for her. And then she doesn't know that, but he knew that. He's like, all right, as soon as they get out of the minefield, they'll hit the planet. They're going to do one more thing. And even when she gets there and they're like, should we send another fleet out? And he's like, no. Her main goal is she's going to try to find Ezra Bridger. Let her find him. So by the time she finds him and they try to make it back to us, we'll be loaded up and ready to go. We out of here. And I was like, this guy is too smart. I want to say too smart for his own good. I think he's just too smart to be good. Like, when you can figure things out at that clip as fast as he does and plan the way he does, who can stop you? Like, everything left for anyone else, like any opposition, is all up to chance, because he's already planned every move out. Even when he doesn't come out on top, he's like, it's not a failure, because this happened. This is probably still important for this to happen, and we can come back and do this later. That's fine. And I'm gonna say, like, this guy is Well, let me ask you really quick. Would you argue that Thrawn is a better strategist than Palpatine? Tough one, right?
In a military sense, yes. In a military sense, yes.
Okay.
As we know, Palpatine was very against aliens. He was very much about humans only, and you don't see exactly many commanders or people higher up in the Empire who aren't human.
Right.
And he earned Palpatine's respect, and through his ability to plan strategically and to win battles and having that longer term of view rather than just seeing the battle at the end of his nose, he was able to rise through the ranks.
Right.
Palpatine is a master strategist.
Yeah.
He played the long game to get rid of the Jedi of all people.
Right.
So overall, Palpatine would still kick his ass, I think, in terms of strategy. Thrawn can see the long game, and he could potentially see Palpatine's plans if he had enough time to work it out. But Palpatine's playing a chess game so advanced, he's looking decades ahead of himself rather than a few months or a few rebel cells ahead of him, like Thrawn was doing. So I see what you're trying to say. I think military-wise, if Palpatine was a military commander, it's a little bit different.
Right.
But Palpatine was playing a game so far ahead of Thrawn that in the long game, it doesn't really compare for me. I should say I'm a Sidious fan, so that's probably a little bit biased. But yeah, I think Palpatine plays the game so far longer and so far advanced that it doesn't really, no one else can really match up to that, unfortunately.
You know what? I like that take, because that's the one thing I couldn't put together, because I feel like Thrawn is up there, but like to your point, Palpatine. And I was, one of my other friends was reading the Darth Plagueis book. Like Palpatine's plans for everything begin almost in that story when he's learning from Plagueis. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
He already has mindset. I'm going to take over the universe. This is how I'm going to do it. Gets rid of his master, takes on an apprentice without his master even knowing. The guy, like you said, he planned light years ahead of his actual end journey. And Thrawn, I think, is very good in the moment and probably right before he needs to. Like he can get it done as long as his troops are functioning at the percentage at the rate that he needs them to function at. He can accomplish what he needs to accomplish, but not as far out as Palpatine, I don't think. Yeah, so I agree with you on that one. Yeah, yeah.
So we get this moment here where they're trying to work out Huyang and Ahsoka where Sabine is on the planet, and Ahsoka decides she's going to reach out through the Force to her, and she's successful in doing this, and Sabine gets that sort of familiar feeling that someone's reaching out to her, and it's been I think a big contentions point in this series about whether Sabine is Force sensitive or not, because there was absolutely no indication of this in Rebels.
Yeah,
and they seem to have almost been slightly trying to redefine who has the Force or how the Force can be in certain people in this series, which has probably been the most controversial point of the series itself, especially early on.
Yep.
I've not been a fan of them trying to potentially redefine what the Force is, because it's laid out pretty clearly in a lot of Star Wars, how you have the Force, who has it at different levels. Everyone has the, excuse me, or every living thing has the Force,
right?
But just at different levels. And we're taught that it doesn't really matter how hard you train. If you don't have a high midichlorian count, so to speak,
right.
You're not going to be able to access the Force to use it on the same level as, say, Jedi or Sith.
Right.
So when Ahsoka takes on Sabine as an apprentice, I always assumed it was to teach her to be more like Jedi in terms of taking that rebellious, impulsive nature that she has and calming it and getting her more centered and focused within herself, which I can absolutely appreciate that, taking on an apprentice to do that. But then just saying, if you trained yourself really hard and had the right attitude and fortitude, you can learn to use the Force, seems a bit out of place. So this then connection that, let's face it, throughout this series, Ahsoka and Sabine have been a bit frosty with each other. They've not exactly been connected, or don't seem to be deeply connected. Not the same way that Sabine is with the rest of the Rebels crew. So the fact that they're deeply connected enough that Ahsoka can reach out through the Force and sense her. How are you feeling about that?
So, I mean, I will say, like, how they're trying to retcon the Force or Force users, that I'm not sure how I feel about that in its entirety. I do, like, I get, like you said, the Force is in every living thing, but to your point, levels, right? Not everybody can be a Jedi. Not everybody can be a Sith. Not everybody's gonna be able to just move a cup from one side of the table to the next. At the very least.
Yeah, I know. I've tried.
Yeah, but it's yeah, I can understand Ahsoka reaching out with the Force and feeling Sabine having the feeling and being able to reciprocate with the Force. Sketchy to me. Because if she wasn't like great at it, how can she just all of a sudden, just start feeling it like that? It's almost like saying that at any given moment, any one person can raise their own metachlorine route level without training. They just have to feel it. Like that's not ex machina if I've ever heard it. Like it's just not. We can't just do things anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, if she ends up being able to move stuff at the end in this next episode, I'm probably not going to be too happy.
Yeah.
By the end of the series, she's, because it always seems to be like a traumatic event happens, and they all of a sudden have access to the Force, and it's just don't do that.
Ever since the Force Awakens, like they I think that's where it started with them trying to like retcon Force users in the Force. Just everybody has access to it. It's that part I don't have too much of an issue with. But again, if you don't go through the training, or if your readout has been stated that your metachlorine level is so low, you can't like lift a pebble with the Force. I don't think she should be able to communicate either.
No. Like Hugh Yang stated it a few episodes before, didn't he? He's like, out of all the people I've seen, all the younglings I've seen in the temple for the last 1,000 years or whatever, he's like, you are the least powerful one out of every single one of them.
Right.
You have the least amount of force in you. So it was, apart from being a fantastically brutally put down, it just should reiterate this fact that she's not force sensitive to the way that they may perhaps keep making her out to be, especially when earlier in the last episode, just as Thrawn's ship was turning up, she looks like she's going to attempt to force open the door as well. So she seems to be believing more and more that she has this ability, or potentially has the ability to do so. She's focused enough and trained enough, and it's just like, I could do without this of this side of it, because there was no hint to it in Rebels at all. Like, you can be trained with a lightsaber. Because I think we've seen it plenty of times where people can be trained to use a staff or a lightsaber if you're not a Force user, and you can be proficient with it, like in any weapon, especially Mandalorians.
Exactly.
But when you take a non-Force user with a lightsaber and put them up against a Force user with a lightsaber, like we see at the end of episode 1 when she gets fucking stabbed.
Yeah. Like and to that end, I would say, like, I would rather much prefer Sabine rely on Mandalorian tactics while using a lightsaber. You know what I mean? Like, she doesn't have to be a Jedi. She doesn't have to use the Force. I think I like Mandalorians as they are. Throw some Beskar armor on, give me the weapons, some cool fights. It's great. The moment they pull out a lightsaber, you're adding to that that Mando's arsenal, and it just makes them even more dangerous. So it's like, again, I don't need her to be proficient in the Force. I don't. She doesn't have to be a Jedi. She can use a lightsaber all day and night. I'm for that. I'm for it. I would love to see a gang of Mandalorians with lightsabers. That would be awesome, right?
That'd be pretty cool.
But
yeah. So fair enough, she shouldn't be Force proficient. I did skip past something actually at the start of this episode, which I meant to mention, just looking at my notes on the screen, is obviously the start of this episode as well, we get Ahsoka in the training room with a hologram of Clone Wars Anakin walking around. And this evoked two memories for me straight away, which is in Rebels, when we see there's an episode where we see her sitting down and she's sort of like meditating in the Force whilst listening to a recording of Anakin talking about lightsaber forms. which obviously is a reflection of that, and because she's then practicing the same form, which is Form 4, as Anakin was talking about in the Rebels hologram, which is a great little callback. Then it also very much reminded me of the episode of Tales of the Jedi, where Anakin's teaching Ahsoka to take on the clones in order to survive any kind of battle,
and he's got her in the ring of troopers. Yes, that's saying
it very much reminded me of that sort of thing, where he's teaching her, you need to be able to survive anything, and I'm teaching you to survive anything. So I thought those were two callbacks that really hit me. And then we see her put the hologram hologram disc away in a box where she's got lots of other recordings. But I don't know if you noticed in the background, because this was a Jedi ship as well, in that same area where the box of hologram discs were, there were plenty of lightsaber hilts on the wall. Right there as well. Because when I watched the episode earlier on, I looked hard at it. And when I didn't recognize any of the lightsaber hilts as anyone specific, but they weren't just like training hilts or like plastic hilts or anything like that. They looked all like there was a good 10 to 15 lightsaber hilts stored here. So I don't know if that would mean anything, or if anyone, I generally see it a few days later on TikTok about someone's picked it apart and will be able to tell us if there's anyone specifics there. But it was just something I just noticed, that there was all these different lightsaber. It's a bit like when you've seen callbacks in some of the other shows in like the training rooms in different Jedi temples. There all seems to be a plethora of different lightsaber hilts on the walls that you can pick up and use. Maybe these are like from previous Fallen Jedi and things like that they keep there. But it was just a nice little thing that I saw. But it was good to have one last appearance from Anakin as well. Because I don't think anyone was expecting to see him again in this series. Even if it wasn't the same way, it was just a nice little cameo appearance.
Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, I think now that we've got Ahsoka the White, I think we actually might see more Anakin. Like, again, hopefully, we do get a second season before an eventual movie or something like that. But I do think we get more of Anakin just through those training like modules, like, because that it'll be almost like Tony Stark speaking to like Friday. Like that'll be her personal AI when she's in meditation mode, and I would love to see that, because you get to hear. We'll probably hear more gems from Anakin, like even with the with him trainers telling her about the form that she was using. I honestly feel like the part of Clone Wars that gave you the memory of, because it did the same for me. I think that's the actual same speech he gave her during that.
I did think that, and as soon as the episode finished, I did sit and watch the Tales of the Jedi episode, and it's not, unfortunately, the exact same speech. Because I thought I literally said to my other half, I was like, "This is the same speech. I swear to God, word for word." Went back and watched it, and it's not. Unfortunately, it's not actually close, but it very much evokes the memory of it, didn't it? So
yeah. But yeah, I think we get more. I think we get more of Anakin in that nature. So, and it would be great. I'll take it every time.
Yeah,
or even if she ends up going back to the world between worlds and we see more of Anakin there, I'm all for it. Give it all to me.
Just give me more Anakin. Fuck it. Make an Anakin show. Oh no, we've already talked about this.
Yes.
But then at the very start of this episode, again, I'm backtracking now, but we get this scene of obviously Hera in front of the Senate committee, with Senator Ziono wanting to. Well, he's just being a dick, and wanting to strip her of command. And we get this cool little cameo from C-3PO.
Yes, that was awesome.
Which was really cool, because I think C-3PO is a character that people either love or hate. And when I say hate, I mean because he's just a bit camp and annoying, really. And he's just like, he's always like thinking he's better than like R2-D2, and R2-D2 is the real hero of the story, as we know. But again, cool little cameo in there. Obviously, name dropping Leia in there as well.
Yeah. That'd have been so great if we actually had Carrie Fisher for this.
Oh,
because I think if she was still alive, that would have been her cameo, which would have been so good. Rest in peace.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, but even still, C-3PO, great little one to put in there.
Yes.
And obviously a bit more Chopper in the background as well, being a bit feisty, which is always good.
He's especially when droid.
especially when Ziono's like, "Are we supposed to take the word of this mere droid?" And Chopper's like, "Oi, fucker, listen, we're not just mere droids."
Oh man, that part was hilarious.
Yeah, it was, to be fair. But yeah, good to see C-3PO back. Would have been nice to see R2 as well, but you can't get everything, I suppose. R2's
Yeah.
off with Luke, isn't he? I guess so.
Yeah. Which again, I don't know how we don't get more Luke out of this.
I think at some point we'll get another cameo somewhere, but then moving on this episode, we get back to Ezra and Sabine together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to skip over a little bit and go back on it again just to talk about this as a whole. But them obviously having a chat together, they did feel a bit, because I was unsure how Ezra was going to come across, whether it was going to feel like a bit of Ezra that we got from Rebels, or whether he's completely changed in the 10 years he's been away. And it did feel like some of their interactions were like Sabine and Ezra from Rebels, to be fair. So that was kind of nice to have some of them in there. And then, Shin and the Raiders all turn up to have this battle with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this weird moment between them where Sabine's like, "Here's your lightsaber, you can have it back." And he's like, "No, it's fine, you keep it, you've been training." She's like, "No, but it's yours." He's like, "No, I gave it to you, it's yours now." He's like, "I've got the Force, that's all I need." And it's like, really, dude, just take the fucking lightsaber.
Right.
Like, she's got guns and Beskar, you've got nothing, really. I do have a slight criticism here in the fact that I felt like Ezra's fight scenes in this episode weren't great.
Right.
Maybe it felt like he was either the actor himself was a little bit slow or clunky, or maybe they just didn't have enough time really to properly flesh out the action scene here.
Yeah.
But it did feel a bit slow and a bit clumsy from Ezra's the actor doing the fight scenes. I don't know how you felt about that, but to me it just wasn't quite there. And even the little force pushes he does, it didn't feel like proper force pushes in terms of they didn't really go flying or anything like that.
I feel like so here's the thing. The funny part is we had been talking about the moment we actually get to see Ezra Bridger. There was rumors that he fights without a lightsaber. It's supposed to be like this kind of like martial arts with the Force. So in my head, the moment he said, "Oh, it's cool, you keep it. I don't need it. I got the Force." I was expecting 100% some Jackie Chan like catching people's foot with the Force and flinging them someplace, and it wasn't that. It was a bit of a clunky fight scene where it seemed more like it seemed more like a bar fight with somebody who was like somewhat drunk, not all the way. Like he's clear on what's happening, but he definitely don't have full control of all motor functions, so he's just kind of flopping around. It was cool for what it was, but my expectations were a little higher from what I thought was going to happen, or how I thought it would have looked. I would say in terms of the entire episode, it's passable. But if we just had to leave it as that was the only fight that we got that episode, I may have been disappointed just a little bit.
Yeah,
but not bad. But could have been better. I don't think they worked out the choreography for him to showcase like how cool this could look. Yeah.
No, I think that's fair. And then we get the night troopers turn up, and a couple of ships worth turn up. And I think this is where we then lay to rest the theory about them being undead or zombie-like troopers, because we see plenty of them killed, and no green dust or smoke comes out of any of them, like in the same way that it did with Marek.
Yes.
So I think this is where we put to bed that these are just probably normal remnant stormtroopers left over from when the Chimera was taken or brought here 10 years ago. So it's a shame, because it would have been cool to have zombie stormtroopers. But at least theoretically anyway, we can put that theory to bed a little bit now. We saw it, but again, they all get their asses whooped. It's like, oh my god, there's two or three of them there. I know two of them are technically Force users and one Mandalorian, but fuck me, there was like 30 of you. How could you not take them out?
That's probably
kind
what
of annoys
Thrawn
me a
was
little
thinking.
bit sometimes. I'm like, I know the clone troopers were like experts, but it only took like a small like group of them to take out a Jedi. So how can 30 stormtroopers not do the job? I really don't know.
Well, I mean, they got a hard time hitting the target anyway. So.
Well, we know about that. But then backtracking slightly to earlier in this episode is we get this bit between Balin and Shin, where he basically is sending her off on her own now. He's like, go and kill Ezra, go and kill Sabine, take your place with Thrawn in the coming Empire. My path is taking me elsewhere. And she seems a bit shocked about this and a bit upset. And he gives us some parting wisdom as well in terms of like, don't rush to win the battle, because that will just lead to you failing.
Yeah.
And she, from that moment on, I think for the rest of, even though she goes into her battle with Sabine and Ezra, and obviously Ahsoka as well, with the same conviction that she seems to have had, but she almost looks lost as well and a bit scared, especially when she seems to have been beaten at the end, and the troopers have been recalled, and she's just stood there facing the three of them, and she just looks scared and just runs off.
Yeah.
So I feel a bit sorry for her in this episode in a way. I don't think she feels her training has been completed, and the way that she looked up to Balin as like this wise master, and he's all of a sudden abandoned her for this, what he feels is a greater purpose.
Right. Yeah, I got that sense from her too. And at the same time, because the entire time I was wondering, like, is this his daughter, or is this just like some random kid that he just took under his wing? Because she did have that look of, man, I'm being abandoned. Because then right before that, he was telling her, I've trained you to be more than just a Jedi. And so, like, after him saying that and then telling her, hey, listen, you go on ahead, I got this other thing calling me, so I'm going to do that. You do this. That's your path. That's what it seems like you want to accomplish. And I think there are great things for you going this way, but I got to go this other way. And like, when she hears him say that, it's the look on her face, like you said, those eyes, very expressive. Like, the look on her face was almost one of like a father leaving his daughter or leaving his child, in the sense of like, hey, I gotta go. I may be back, might not, but you're gonna do great, kid. Don't worry, you got it. Then the punch in the arm. Yeah.
Go on, sport, get out there.
Make something of yourself. Boom. And I think she picked up on what he was saying though, right after the stormtroopers were called back, because if this had been a few episodes earlier, she would have stayed and continued trying to fight. When really she should have left, because Thrawn had no qualms leaving her or Balin's go. So her leaving now puts her back on the Chimera, and she gets to stay on for however longer, if it's just the next episode or we get to see her in the next season or not. She gets to stay on. And again, Balin, I hope we get something else with that character. I mean, we definitely are probably not going to get him in the second season, but whatever they decide to do with his character from this point on, I'm very much interested in if they can do something with it. But I think Shinahati at this point is going to be kind of like that. She feels more like a Sith warrior than a dark Jedi. Because you can tell, like, she's guided very much by her emotions. Like, even when she fights Sabine the first couple times, the moment Sabine gets an upper hand for just a second, you see her get, you stop playing with me. You can't beat me for real. Like, and you can see it on her face. So I think with her, we're going to see, she's going to mature a lot, I think, in the next episode. Because even her making the decision to leave, when she could have stayed and fought. Probably not Ahsoka, but definitely she probably could have stayed and taken out Sabine or maybe even Ezra, maybe. But her leaving, I think, was growth on her part. Just finding that maturity to go like, all right, I would try this, but I'm outnumbered. These guys are leaving and I have no idea why, so let me just go follow suit.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess it speaks to Balin's last words to her about, not rushing to win, because that will make you lose. Whereas I just thought she turned and ran out of fear. Kind of like bad guys do. Run off with your tail between your legs and and because that or whether it's her wising up, going, okay, against these three, this isn't a battle I can win.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think as well, obviously you've set up, in the last episode, Balin's character, where obviously he had his face off with Ahsoka again, which I think a lot of people were predicting that when they faced off again, Ahsoka would kill him.
Yeah.
It's like basically the revenge battle as always happens. That old trope, to be fair.
Yeah.
What was interesting though is that again, Ahsoka, as we've known her, is a very capable and very strong Jedi. Who I think if you put her up against a lot of other Jedi in lightsaber battles, would come out on top.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that she can't clearly beat this guy, and there's even the moment when obviously he catches her lightsaber and he's like, "You can't beat me," and she's like, "Maybe, but I don't need to beat you. I just need to distract you," sort of thing.
Right.
So it's interesting. This seems to be almost like a character that, in terms of a lightsaber battle, Ahsoka doesn't seem capable of beating for some reason.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I looked at that fight, that second fight, and I was thinking like, I think she can beat him. I think Balin, because of his first victory against her, was just overconfident in the second fight, and I think Ahsoka in the second fight was more of like, yeah, this is, I can distract him for a little bit. I don't have to give my all for this fight, because to be fair, in the beginning of the series, when she's, do we want to call her Ahsoka the Dark or
Ahsoka the Grey?
Yeah, she's not. You can tell like she's not 100% in the moment.
Yeah,
her mind is constantly somewhere else, so she's distracted for the first couple episodes. And then the first time she fights Balin, she's like worried about Sabine. She's trying to make sure that, hey, if I don't make it, don't give him this map, because if you do, that's it. So she's got a lot going through her head than just being in the moment and focusing on this fight, or just making sure that this task is handled. So when he wins, like even when he wins and he kicks her off the ledge, we're like, oh man, that didn't go so well for her. But if you look at the way Balin fights, it's not that different from the way Anakin fights as Vader.
Yeah,
it's a lot of straightforward and direct blows, which are fast, hard, and singular motions. And Ahsoka is a much more fluid style. So I think her style requires way more movement than Balin's or Anakin's. Because if you remember, when she was fighting Anakin in the World Between Worlds, the first round, she was completely on the defensive. There was no win for her. And you can see him kind of switch in between the strikes. He went from kind of like a Clone Wars twirly, I'm doing a lot of acrobatic things with this lightsaber, into moving into a more like, this is hard blows I'm throwing at you, and they're hard enough that the recoil from the impact of him hitting her lightsaber didn't give her enough time to react. And I think that's the way Balin fights. Like it's forceful blows, direct, like the fastest point from A to B. And that's not Ahsoka style. So I think the term "styles make fights" was very, very on point for this particular matchup. Can Ahsoka beat him? Yes, I think she very much so can. And I think if they were to fight over a prolonged period of time, and there wasn't a way for her to fall off a cliff or out of a ring or something like that, Ahsoka wins for sure. You put them in a hallway, Balin wins. I think Balin wins. But yeah, I feel like Ahsoka's a much more evolved Force user to just not be able to beat Balin Skull. But again, I don't know as much about Balin Skull than I do of Ahsoka. So it's hard to say, but it's also, kind of a thing you from the eye test, you go like, oh, I can see why he would think that she can't beat him, because he's had success the first time out. And this time out, you're dealing with a very different Ahsoka. She's clear, level-headed. She knows exactly what she's doing. Even up to the moment she goes, yeah, maybe, but I don't have to. That's a clear sign. When somebody says something like that to me, it's more like, so you're just playing around. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to wrap this episode up, obviously we get Thrawn saying that, him again thinking about the bigger picture in the longer game. He's like, we could even consider, what's happened today as a victory because, whilst Ahsoka's been wasting time battling and saving the others, we've pretty much got our cargo loaded and we're ready to start, making the trip back.
Yep.
So 1 episode to go next week. Hard to really say apart from the fact that Thrawn's pretty much, I think, almost guaranteed to obviously make it back to the actual Star Wars galaxy.
Yeah.
And the heroes alongside him in some way or another as well. They'll make their own way back somehow, whether it's sneaking onto Chimera or whether hitching a ride in the wet mouth of a Purgle again. Any predictions for the final episode in terms of how this season plays out?
Man.
Or, just to throw something out there, because there's a lot to wrap up with Thrawn going back and the others going back, and then Balin looking for this alternative power that's on the planet, do we actually not get them leaving this galaxy at the end of the series, and we won't see that to the series too?
Okay, so my theory for the last episode is they very much so leave out of that galaxy. But I think what we're going to get is we're going to get a time-sensitive ride back for Ahsoka, Ezra, and Sabine trying to make it to the Chimera. Chimera is going to pull off. I think by the end of episode 8, Thrawn's back in the Star Wars galaxy. I wholeheartedly, because this season they have to fill a lot for it to just be 8 episodes, and for the sheer fact that like we talked about before, we got Thrawn and Ezra appearances in the same episode. So I 100% believe Thrawn gets back to the Star Wars galaxy end of next episode, and that's where things are going to get
nuts.
Yeah, it's going to get super nuts because again, the Republic is not ready.
God, don't even get me started on this shitty New Republic. They're really pissing me off at the moment. So I try and avoid talking about these fucking nut jobs. Who are just welcoming all the fucking downfall that they possibly can. I think I said it in another episode that I'm almost glad they all fucking get blown up in episode 7. Really pissed me off a little bit to that extent. So not that I wish genocide on billions of people, but good riddance to them. So that's.
Yeah, and I'm also curious to see is what's waiting for Thrawn in the original galaxy. Like, does he already have things set up that he's coming back to? Because again, we know by this point, Palpatine's somewhere in Exegol because nobody knows where that's at. And he's got a crazy fleet. And what if Thrawn was just always has been his backup plan? Thrawn comes back, reestablishes the Empire, and Palpatine comes back and goes, hey, thanks for doing my job for me. and just takes over. You know what I mean? So I think we get something close to that, although we know Palpatine's not going to take over, but
yeah. Well, obviously we've only got a week to find out, less than a week. So I'm really excited to get to the end of this and just see what happens. Always a shame when a series comes to an end.
I know.
You always want a bit more, as you said. Need more Star Wars. There's never any shame in having more Star Wars. So
never.
But we'll certainly have to wait and see exactly what happens in next week's finale episode. But Features, thank you so much, buddy, for coming on this week. It has been a great chat. We've been going for almost 2 hours, to be fair.
Yeah. Wow.
I think this clocks in about my 3rd longest ever episode. So I don't really care because it's fucking Star Wars, and I would chat about this for hours if it wasn't for the fact that I don't think anyone would listen to me talk that long about Star Wars. So I really appreciate you coming on, buddy. I'm glad we were finally getting together after the last couple of weeks.
I know it has been a time trying to get on to it with each other, but I appreciate you for having me, man. This is I'm always down to talk about Star Wars. Again, more Star Wars. Always.
Tell everyone at home exactly where they can find you and the That Comic podcast online.
So you can find me at P_features on everything. If you're looking for me on PlayStation Network, it's P_features 83. You can also find me on at That Comic Podcast on Instagram and on I was about to say Twitter, but on X, it's That Comic Pod. But and we're also on Threads, That Comic Podcast on all
dead
social
thing that no one uses.
Yeah. Yeah. But on all socials, That Comic Podcast, except for X, That Comic Pod. Yeah.
Nice.
Holler at us.
I take it by the 83. You're an 83 baby.
Yes.
Representing my man. I'm an 83 baby too.
Yes.
But I really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to be doing my episodes a bit differently from now on, simply because for the Loki series that comes out next Friday.
Yeah.
That's out next week. Because that comes out on a Friday, it does mean I'm changing the days that my podcast is now coming out. I normally get it out there on a Thursday or a Friday, after obviously listening or watching an episode on a Wednesday. But because it's coming out on a Friday, means I'm not going to be doing episodes till a Monday now in terms of releasing them. So a bit of a change as of next week, because it's going to be a double feature next week. We've got the finale of Ahsoka and the opening episode of Loki season 2 in next week's review. So I'll be back for that with obviously another great guest.
Nice.
But until then, everyone, look after yourself, and as always,
the Force will be with you always.